L'honorable députée de Laurier, Sainte-Marie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et j'aimerais vous préciser, en commençant, que je vais partager mon temps avec mon collègue, le député de Cowichan-Malahat-Langford. Monsieur le Président, on est tous d'accord, évidemment, que le groupe armé État islamique commet d'horribles crimes, des actes absolument barbares en Irak et en Syrie, puis qu'en plus, il menace la sécurité de tous à travers le monde. Et on est tous d'accord que, essentiellement, il faut s'en débarrasser et il faut se débarrasser de son message de haine. Et qu'il faut le faire aussi, je crois, en ne créant pas en même temps d'autres monstres. La semaine dernière, le gouvernement nous a enfin présenté son plan pour faire face à cet énorme défi. Je vais vous dire tout de suite en débutant, il y a certains éléments de ce plan-là qui, en principe, tout au moins, sur papier, sont intéressants. Je pense notamment à l'augmentation de l'aide humanitaire. C'est quelque chose que nous, on a demandé pendant longtemps. Et donc, je suis contente de voir qu'il y a une hausse de notre aide humanitaire. Quelque chose qu'on a toujours demandé aussi, que je suis contente de voir dans le plan, c'est une aide au développement et éviter, notamment pour éviter que la déstabilisation se propage à travers la région à des pays fragiles comme le Liban ou encore à la Jordanie. Et des efforts diplomatiques, c'est sûr, c'est certain, c'est une clé essentielle de la solution de ce problème. Mais tout ça est beau sur papier, mais there are also gaping holes. First, the issue of the combat mission. It is a combat mission, even though the government refuses to acknowledge it. You know, when the government during the election campaign said that they would withdraw the CF-18, I think most people understood, okay, Canada is going to stay away from the military mission and put the emphasis elsewhere. Well, it's a strange way of withdrawing from the combat mission. I mean, first about the airstrikes. Let's be honest, we won't have CF-18 anymore, you know, but we'll do refueling, targeting, all kinds of things. We're still participating in the bombing mission. And then we are going to triple the troops on the ground. And we're doing so with no clear parameters, with no exit strategy, with no criteria about, you know, what will be success, when can we feel that we've achieved what we want to achieve. It is a combat mission, and it is a combat mission with boots on the ground. We know that under the Conservatives, the troops were spending a significant part of their time at the front line. We had Sergeant Doiron, who died at the front line, and now we're tripling those troops, and General Vance acknowledged that we're increasing the risk to our troops. And it was interesting this morning, I heard some Liberal MPs in their speeches saying that the government is ready to fight ISIL on the ground, okay? So if this is not a combat troop, what is it, you know? An elephant? I'm sorry, but I think that the government, and interestingly, the current Prime Minister, while in opposition, was saying, oh, the government must be clear about what is a combat role and what is not. Now they're keeping the same ambiguity. I think the government should acknowledge it's a combat mission. They owe it to the Canadians, and above all, they owe it to the troops themselves, to our men and women serving in the forces. Then we're going to give arms to the Kurds. We can't even track the arms that we're selling to Saudi Arabia, which are now finding themselves in Yemen and What knows what we're going to learn tomorrow? So what are they going to do exactly to make sure that those arms are not used to the wrong ends or don't fall in the wrong hands? And training for the Kurds, will it be only about fighting, or maybe include a bit of human rights, respect for international law? Because this is part of the problem, too. There are reports from Amnesty, recent reports from Amnesty International, saying that in their fight, the Kurds have committed possibly war crimes. So we need training, certainly to include that. And there's issues where, you know, we talk generally, the plan talks generally about it like governance, but there's no detail, there's not much information. Qu'est-ce que le gouvernement va faire exactement du côté de la gouvernance? Bon, on nous dit qu'on va envoyer des conseillers au ministère de la Défense. Moi, ça me semble être plus pour faire du recrutement, de renseignement et tout ça. Mais il y a tellement à faire en Irak au niveau de la gouvernance. Les problèmes, ça, pourquoi le groupe armé État islamique a réussi à s'installer dans le pays, c'était à cause de la dislocation de la société irakienne. Il faut travailler là-dessus parce que sinon, ça sera aujourd'hui le groupe armé État islamique ou demain un autre. Pourquoi est-ce que le Canada ne travaillerait pas, par exemple, à faciliter un processus de réconciliation en Irak? C'est seulement comme ça qu'on va réussir à régler le problème à long terme. Même chose pour l'engagement diplomatique. Très bien, mais on dit on va s'engager diplomatiquement. Oui, mais ensuite, mais encore, qu'est-ce qu'on propose au juste? Finalement, il y a des éléments centraux du mandat que l'ONU nous a donné et qui sont essentiels pour étouffer le groupe armé État islamique, pas seulement au Moyen-Orient et en Libye, mais à travers le monde. Il faut leur couper l'approvisionnement en armes, en argent et en combattants. Et le plan libéral est vraiment pas très fort, à peu près muet là-dessus. Et ce qui me frappe, entre autres, c'est qu'il n'y a absolument rien sur la déradicalisation. Et sachons-le, Monsieur le Président, par exemple, les événements qu'on a vus à Paris, à Jakarta, à Ouagadougou, qui ont mené à un renouveau, un renforcement de la volonté de détruire non seulement le groupe armé, mais cette idéologie haineuse, c'est des gens qui avaient été radicalisés dans leur propre pays. Alors, pourquoi est-ce qu'on ne parle même pas de déradicalisation dans le plan des libéraux? Mr. Speaker, I have just a few minutes just to say that I'm afraid we may be repeating the errors of the past. We have tried to rely on the military approach in various parts of the world, and unfortunately, the result is not that good. In fact, we may be winning battles for the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, but losing the war on terrorism. Because it is a new kind of war, a war of the 21st century. It's a war of propaganda, and it's a war which breeds on chaos and unaddressed grievances. We hear that some of the towns that have been retaken are completely destroyed. Ramadi, seemingly, has been reduced to rubble at 80% of Ramadi has been reduced to rubble. The population cannot go back there. We have also, after Paris in particular, certain rules of engagement have been relaxed, which will mean inevitably more civilian casualties. So are we creating more chaos? Are we creating more grievances? So, if so, we're just exacerbating the problem. So let's give hope to what I think can actually work. Yes, indeed, humanitarian assistance, but above all, cutting what sustain these groups, arms, money, foreign fighters, and let's try and find a political solution both in Syria and in Iraq. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Question and commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I found it interesting when the member seemed to be surprised in terms of some of the Liberal speakers when they talked about Canada's role. And let's be very clear that bombing is something in which is going to continue to occur. There's a global coalition that's going to be providing that. There is going to be combat, obviously, at the ground level too. Now, Canada's role is very clear in the motion. Contrary to what she and other members of the New Democratic Caucus might say, Mr. Speaker, it is very clear. All one needs to do is to read the motion and listen to some of the speeches that have been given by many of my Liberal colleagues. One of the most significant things that we are doing is that we are going to be increasing the training force. Based on Canada's expertise acquired through situations of Afghanistan and so forth, that Canada has a lot to offer. And this is something in which the government has determined that we will triple in terms of the size. My question specific for the member is, does she not recognize or does she not believe that Canada can, in fact, use its expertise that has been acquired in Afghanistan in order to provide the opportunity to combat ISIL into the future?
La députée de Laurier, Sainte-Marie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, d'abord, merci à mon collègue pour sa question. Ceci dit, je vais être en désaccord avec lui sur un aspect important. My colleague says that all one needs to do is read the motion. I think one needs to read the motion and the background papers and hear answers from the minister to get at the reality of things. If we thought, if General Vance says there's a risk for more casualty from the training we're doing, if we have in-theater transportation, if we just continue, there's nothing indicating that we are going to change the mission from what it was before, which means targeting at the front line and our military personnel spending a significant amount of time at the front line with the Kurds. I'm sorry, for me, and if we'll listen to Liberal colleagues saying that they're ready to, fight on the ground, well, I think you have to go a bit beyond the motion, take all this into account, and everybody can see that it is a combat mission. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Member for Chilliwack, Hope.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I listened with interest to the member's speech, and I appreciate the position of the NDP. I don't agree with it, but at least they are ideologically consistent. They oppose this sort of use of our military force in combat, especially when it occurs outside of our borders, as it usually does. But I want to talk to her about how I see the Liberal government seems to want to have it both ways. They seem to want to expand into humanitarian and other things that were already happening on the ground. And then they say, well, but we're pulling out of the bombing. And she referenced this in her speech. They're actually participating to a large extent. They're painting targets on the ground. Our forces will be. They will be refueling the fighter jets. They will be providing reconnaissance with the Auroras so that we can pick targets. The coalition can pick targets. So I guess from my perspective, if they're going to enable the bombing, why does she think that they won't go the next step and actually leave our CF-18s in theatre?
The Honourable Member for Laurier, Sainte-Marie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et merci à mon collègue pour sa question, que je trouve effectivement très pertinente. Bon, il comprendra que nous ne sommes pas d'opinion de garder les CF-18 dans la région. Nous ne sommes pas d'accord avec ça, mais c'est vrai que le gouvernement semble vouloir avoir le beurre et l'argent du beurre, dire une chose, en faire une autre. On se retire de la mission de combat, mais quand on regarde les détails, dans le fond, on ne se retire pas tant que ça. Ça semble devenir une routine puisqu'on a vu la même attitude sur d'autres sujets, de s'opposer à certaines choses et de voter pour. Donc, c'est assez intéressant, mais et moi, ce que j'aimerais, c'est qu'effectivement, le gouvernement soit plus clair. Et comme je le disais lors de mon bref discours, notamment sur la question de si c'est une mission de combat ou non, je pense que le gouvernement doit la vérité aux Canadiens et à nos hommes et nos femmes dans les forces armées. Merci, Monsieur le Président.